Hey, Bobby Manning here. Welcome to a Friday edition of the Garden Report, and excited to welcome in Boston Globe's Gary Washburn, who spent the day in Boston right by my side at the Celtics parade. And it was his first championship parade. It was a big one. I think 1.5 million people, they were saying, Gary, in the area for this one. And it was pretty exhilarating. We were on the back of a pickup truck, a couple reporters, couple TV guys, and we were right in front of, fortunately, Joe Mazzulla's boat. And so we got to see the whole couple miles of Joe celebrations, Joe jumping off the boat, Joe fist pumps, Joe jumping on top of the duck boat. It was a sight.
I mean, it's hard to put into words just all of the sights that we saw today. And obviously, my first parade in Boston, I didn't go to any like the Red Sox. I've been here 15 years, but I didn't go to any of the Red Sox or Patriots parades or whatever. And I'm sure those were similar, but this was just like the whole city came out, and just to see as many people all decked in green and just from all different places. I'm sure all over the Northeast and maybe parts of the different parts of the country, and just uh, people texting me, "Hey, I see you." Friends of mine who are out there, and just an amazing experience. All different shade, colors, nationalities, people from different, I'm sure all parts of Massachusetts and us at the Northeast, and it didn't matter. None of that mattered. They were all Celtic fans and came out to celebrate a championship. And man, that's a special moment when you see the whole city just show their love. Um, and the players show that love back, and the coaches, and Mazzulla was definitely a different guy than we usually deal with. Uh, and I think a weight's been lifted off his shoulder, as it has a lot of other guys on that team. So it was a pretty incredible experience just to ride backwards and just see the people, going through and just seeing all the faces, the signs, and, you know, babies and 2 year olds and 82 year olds. I mean, just an amazing experience, one that I won't forget.
Were you surprised? Are you a parade guy? What were you expecting? What surprised you the most?
Yeah, I'm not, I'd never been to a parade like that before. Excuse me. And I didn't know what to expect. I thought there'd be people out there, but that, that whole like 7 or 8 deep on both sides, and people hanging on top of buildings, watching from the office buildings. Just the whole thing was just surreal. Riding through parts of Massachusetts that are so historic, and it's just like the entire city. And I just think, you know, Boston is a city that people don't know a lot about who are outside of Boston. They only know about Paul Revere. I mean, they don't may not know about Christmas Addicts and some of the great events before the Revolutionary War and all the things that have happened in this city. And it was just amazing to see people in some of these historic parts of the city just line the streets, and everybody was cooperative. I mean, I think we saw a couple of people who were out for the count before the thing even started. That
Yeah,
it's not a good look, but hopefully they're okay. They'll be good.
it was hot out there, Gary.
Get a good night's sleep tonight, and hopefully they'll be ready to back to normal tomorrow. But I didn't see any incidents. I mean, there was nothing there. It was flawless, and people were just excited and waving and drinking and holding up signs, and just the general excitement. And I don't know what it's like for the Patriots and the Red Sox. I didn't go to the Bruins parade in 2011. I'm sure that was exciting, but I can't imagine just a better representation of the city than I saw today. Like, people don't know how diverse this city is, and how many people from different countries and different parts of the world are here, different nationalities. It was just fun to see everybody, and everybody was just celebrating. There was no issues, and man, that was really great.
Yeah, and I guess we'll go to Joe because he's the guy we watched all day. I tweeted this out an hour ago or so. I've never seen a guy in this area whose status and belovedness and overall personality just raised levels over the course of a couple weeks, over the course of a month here. He felt like the star of the show today, and he's standing on the duck boat, pumping his fist, going crazy. Every time he did that, the crowd rose to another level. They're spraying champagne off the boat. His son's up there dancing. He jumped off the boat at one point and started high-fiving fans. And of course, he's making the media rounds right now, and there's a lot of quotables and everything else from him right now. And of course, uh, his game plan, his philosophy, his style really got affirmed by this run in many ways, how dominant it was. And of course, a championship in your second year as head coach at 36 or, whatever he is right now, puts him in position to potentially be the coach of this team for a long time. So this is a real coming out party for Missoula over the last month or so. And you saw, I think you said a couple minutes ago, the weight got lifted off him. You saw his personality shine in a way that you really don't in a lot of these public appearances he makes. And of course, the pressure got lifted off him that he dealt with over the last 2 years here. So it was really cool to see him in this environment. And it just stuck out to me how much the crowd fed off him. And I'm sure they did to the other guys as well. But at least off all the video I've seen and everything else of the other guys, I know Sam Hauser took his shirt off and Porzingis was, drinking nips and beers, and, Tatum was throwing a football. But Missoula, to me, was the star of the show today, and it was pretty remarkable to see.
Yeah, I mean, it's good to see him, that other side of him. And I'm not, and we only know one side of Joe. I think there's several sides to Joe, and I think when you get to know him personally, there's times that you get the chance to talk to him off the record, and he's more of a looser guy off the record when the lights aren't on. But I understand he's going to be a little intense, and that's just his style. That's who he is. He's an intense guy. He is just a guy who is still, very young in terms of a coaching hierarchy, and in terms of like 35 is I know Charles Lee, I think, is 38, 39, and that's young for a coach. Any coach in their 30s, that's remarkably young, in this profession. And so he's going to be intense, and he's going to think that people didn't believe that he was qualified to take this job. I'm sure not only media members who wrote that, and personally, like, I never thought, I thought maybe there was times last year he was a little over his head. I never thought that the Celtics they should just can him or anything like that. I thought he would need to make a tremendous step, though, Bobby, from first year to second year. I thought that was something that he needed to work on, and he made that major step. He got it done. He made that complete step in terms of learning how to deal with the players, had a coaching staff that was behind him. I mean, as much as I don't blame the guys last year on Ime's staff, but they were Ime's guys.
Yep.
And so Ime leaves suddenly, and a lot of those guys are, well, where the hell am I going to coach? Because I came here because of him. So I'm sure Ime told those guys, hey, when I get my next job, you'll have a chance to work with me again. So remember, Bobby, I mean, he interviewed and might have been close to that Brooklyn job before I think people stepped in and told Silver, you can't let this dude come 6 weeks after whatever happened to him in Boston and come back. That's a terrible look. So the Nets, now they got Jordy Hernandez, but they went with Jacques Vaughn and fired him, and they had those problems. But I'm sure he told his guys, wherever I go, you're going to have a job. So Missoula's coaching staff last year, those guys are working hard, but they're also trying to figure out where they're going to live next year and where their kids are going to be, and they're distracted. And I think this year Joe made that step, and he was intense, and there was a lot of pressure to win on this team to win a championship. They were the favorites from basically the Nuggets, and them were the two favorites from the beginning, right? I mean, some people might have thrown the Clippers in there. There might have been some Milwaukee mention, but the two favorite teams to get to the finals was the Celtics and the Nuggets. The Nuggets didn't make it, and the Celtics had to live up to those expectations. I mean, I don't know about you, Bobby, but I couldn't envision what it would have been like if they had lost this finals. Like, it would have been, what the hell do we do now? We made the Porzingis move. We brought in Drew Holiday. We've done everything we think we can do to win a title, and we still can't get it done. Like, it would have been a high level of frustration. Do you run it back? Do you, okay, let's give Drew and Kristaps a second year and see. If they had lost at any point in the playoffs, it would have been a miserable offseason. And so,
Yeah.
living under that pressure, I understand why Joe is a little intense, right? I never blame Joe for being intense. Um, you know, and so to see him today just let loose, shake hands, and really show relief. And he's a Rhode Island kid. I'm sure there's plenty. I saw some people with the 401 area code. We love you, Joe, and kind of signs and that type of thing. He understands how important it is. And I just think for him to loosen up and lighten up with the fans, and for him to come across as a real guy with real emotions, I mean, you can't beat that. I mean, the fans already love this team, but I'm sure they love them even more now.
Yeah, there was definitely a real love there. And there was a skepticism about this team. I feel like even within the fan base, just given how the last couple of years went, and you're watching this whole year and you're wondering, there's a real consistency to them. And you talk about that intensity from Joe. I felt like he set a tone for how consistent they were, just based on things he would emphasize every game, how persistent he was about emphasizing those things, the things they have to do, the small details. Like, that kept them on track for the whole year. And of course, they go 80-21, which is a remarkable level of consistency throughout even the playoffs, how quickly they took care of business in a lot of those series. So that intensity, I think, rubbed off on the guys in terms of how seriously they took this whole run. They didn't have many letdowns this year. Last year, they had letdowns left and right. And you mentioned all the excuses. They were valid. The coaching staff, how quickly he had to take over, the level of the jump he had to take from his previous role to this one, and his youth, of course, too. I mean, some of the guys on the team, I remember Al saying he didn't even really know Joe from his previous role. He'd only been there a year at that point, Horford, but that's pretty telling that the guy taking over isn't known by one of the players at that point, at least personally. So that's the position he was in. It was a tough year. It was a disappointing year, but there were a lot of excuses that were valid. So, I know some people want to see him gone. I felt like if they really believed in him, if they want to see it through, they want to give him that room for growth, it was worth seeing out. And of course, it worked out. And they had to make some adjustments to the roster and everything like that. But uh, it was pretty cool to see his growth this year. It was definitely one of the biggest stories of the team. And obviously, one of the other big stories from the finals was Jalen getting that MVP award. And this season, in many ways, affirming him. Yeah, after his difficult end to last year, too. He couldn't have ended last year in a more tumultuous way. And you had doubts about the contract, and you had just overall sour taste in everybody's mouth based off the 7-8 turnovers he had in that game 7 after Tatum goes down there. And so for a year later, for him to win East Finals MVP and then Finals MVP, how it goes, Gary. Most of the time, the best player on the team just wins MVP. It's the guy everybody voting knows, and they usually get the best stats. And Tatum did have the best stats in this series, the finals here. But Jalen wins based on, I guess for some people, the impact, the leadership, the defense he played on Luka, the efficiency. So it was amazing because, you've seen in different spots like Iguodala win it, and some of these other guys who weren't like the star of their team take that award. And especially on this team where you're always talking about that dynamic, Brown, Tatum, whose team is it? You know, how they make that work for, Tatum to play well by the end, and for Brown to have his role earn him an MVP was pretty remarkable to me, because that doesn't happen often. Like, we'll go way back to like Max winning MVP. Like, those situations where not necessarily like the biggest star on the team wins are pretty rare. And Brown went out, obviously talking about being disrespected and being underrated and snubbed from All NBA and all those different kind of things that were discussed around him. To go from that to Finals MVP, which is a short list. Not many guys have won Finals MVP all time. That's pretty remarkable. And that might even be something that like vaults him into a Hall of Fame conversation already.
Wow, I never really thought of it like that, but you're right. I mean, I want to give couple years before we start talking about Hall of Fame, but yeah, I mean,
Right,
he's
but
on that.
that's an early achievement to check off
Yeah,
your
he
list.
is, but he is definitely on that path. I'll say that. And so for me, it was good to see, because he's heard so much, and he even heard. I mean, both of them, like we get to know these guys, and we see them every day, and the one thing what happens with the finals is that now the entire national landscape is focused. Those guys talk about the Celtics every year and all year. When there's big games if there's an ESPN game, they're going to preview it and they're going to talk about the Celtics. But in this playoff run, there was especially everybody was locked in on what's locked in on the Celtics, right? And what's right with them and what's wrong with them. And Tatum and Brown both took kind of a beating.
Yep.
Tatum especially because he wasn't putting up these 45, because I think people looked at Jalen Brunson and Anthony Edwards and Luka and was like, where's Tatum going to put up that 45-point game? What is he going to? Now, he had 50 last year in Game 7 against Philly that advanced him to the finals, the conference finals. But if you're looking at, he didn't have that, like, just jump on my back, boys. I'm carrying us to victory. He heard a lot of flack. And then Jalen heard a lot of flack, and then, we all talk about the first take. Stephen A said he heard that Jalen was, not marketable because he thinks he knows more than like that. That I'm sure was a shot, and then him not making all NBA, not making all defense, him watching Devin Booker make all NBA over him with a really disappointing Phoenix team. I mean, let's be honest, Bobby, like Phoenix met zero expectations this year. They were not a good team. They got swept in the first round. It was kind of a miserable experience. Frank Vogel got fired, but here we go. Devin Booker makes all NBA over Jaylen Brown, and who's on a championship now team and a championship caliber team. So they had to fire up Jalen, what people are saying, and people they still don't respect my game. And I know his numbers were down this year, but the team was deeper. The team was better. Kristaps had to get shots. An improved Derek had to get shots. Drew had to get shots. Jason has to get shots, and his shots went down too. I mean, you're talking about everybody sacrificed. And so I think Jalen just took that criticism and manifested it into something positive. He didn't lash out. He didn't let it get into his head. He worked more on his game this year and became a plus defender. Because I think everybody has said over the years, Jalen has the capability of being a plus defender. But there was times he would just you've seen it, Bobby, he would ball watch too much and get beat on the back door. He would take plays off defensively because he was mad about his offense. Or, he just didn't lock in 100% on defense, a few years ago. He just was not a impactful defender like he is now. For him to take that step forward, for Jason to take that step forward and become a great distributor, I mean, that just says so much about, those two, and you got to give them credit, and to me, Jalen is a good guy. He's good for us to deal with. But to see him overcome a lot of the criticism, and for him to turn that into being a complete winner and a champion, man, you can't ask for anything more than that.
Yeah, his personality started to shine a little bit more this year too. You're wondering who's going to fill that vocal gap. Smart left when the team traded him, and he even said he felt motivated to step into that role during the East Finals there after he won that MVP award there. He said that was big inspiration for him becoming more vocal this year, and you heard it throughout the playoffs, the mic'd up moments, him at the podium after the losses, pointing out things that they need to do. Trying to get Tatum going, at different points when he was struggling. He did a lot from a vocal standpoint too this year that was surprising. He's not the most naturally loud guy. His personality just started to shine more than it had, at least my time around him this year. You had the Michael effing Jordan quote during the East Finals, which was probably my favorite quote of the playoffs. Talking about, I think it was TJ McConnell he was mentioning there, but Nemhart fit the bill too. Based on what they were doing there. And he was real. He was honest. He's pretty forthright. He was great to cover during this whole run. So
It's funny,
it was cool
Bobby.
to.
Like looking at, not to cut you off, but looking at the NBA Finals MVP. Okay, like if you go back, all of the guys who have won this award are Hall of Famers or head to Hall of Famers, except two. Our friend Max in 1981. We can go beyond that, but I'm talking about 1981 and now, and Andre Iguodala. That's it. The rest of the winners, I mean, Jokic's going to the Hall of Fame, Curry's going to the Hall of Fame, Giannis going to the Hall of Fame, LeBron's going to the Hall of Fame, Kawhi's going to the Hall of Fame, Durant's going to the Hall of Fame. And then we're talking about guys that are already in now. Dirk, Kobe, Paul Pierce, Tony Parker, Chauncey just got in, Tim Duncan, Shaq, MJ, Hakeem Olajuwon, Isaiah Thomas, Dumars, like all these guys. I mean, even going back past the 70s and into the 70s, way before your time, Bobby, Wes Unseld, Bill Walton, Bill Joe White, Rick Barry, John Havlicek, because the award just started in 68, 69 with the great late Jerry West be first one to win it and a losing effort against the Celtics. But everyone that has won this award, Bobby, is a Hall of Famer, except Iguodala. And then, we can talk about Jalen, but that's it. Like, because we talked, like, Jokic, Curry, Giannis, LeBron, Kawhi, and Kevin Durant are all headed in there. First ballot. Yeah. So it does put him on a different plane in a different category now that he's won this award. Because the last guy, Iguodala, okay, he's not going to go in. I would presume that if he does, it would be many years because he did play a long time. And then Max. But if you look at the rest of the set selections, and I'm looking down all the way from 68, 69 now, the only person is Iguodala. So that does put Jalen in a different category. If he continues to ascend, make all-star teams, maybe win another championship, you got to put him. Obviously, I think that number 7 is getting retired because when you win a championship in Boston, that 7 and 0 both being lifted. I think we can safely say that.
42 maybe as well.
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. That's a tough one because what do you then does that open it up? Do you retire Ray Allen's number 20? I know Ray.
That's going to be a debate for a long time.
Ray didn't leave the organization on great terms, and I don't think it was. And people tend to blame him, but going back, Danny could have signed Ray to an extension during the season, and he didn't. Right. And the first person he called in free agency was Jason Terry, someone who played his position and was kind of one of his rivals. And then they tried to offer Ray kind of okay, well, here you go, 2 years, $12 million, and Ray was gone by then. Mentally, he was checked out. But Ray goes to that category. Al left kind of on, I don't know, similar terms than Ray, but he did leave for a conference rival. He did take the money. Like the Celtics were not going to pay him $109 million over 4 years. That was not happening. And he ends up coming back so that he's in good graces. But if he goes to the Naismith Hall of Fame, and that's a question too now, 2-time college champion, because remember, folks, college accomplishments are counted it's not the NBA Hall of Fame. It's a Naismith Hall of Fame. So he a 2-time back-to-back champion will be great on his resume. 3rd overall pick, multi-time All-Star. And one thing you got to credit Al for, Bobby, and I don't know how much credit you give him. I don't want to say something as strong as revolutionized, but he has helped modernize the power forward position by learning how to shoot the three. A lot of bigs followed his suit, followed like Brook Lopez. We can go to the guys who followed Al's lead and became 3-point shooters and then extended their stay in the NBA for 5 to 7 years because Brook Lopez was a post-up big who couldn't really rebound. Then he became a 3-point shooter, and he turned himself into a valuable player, NBA champion, a great defender, where the first half of his career, Brook was kind of, I would say, a disappointment. He was a 7-foot. When you're a 7-footer and you don't rebound, that's not good. But he extended his career, and there's other guys around the league who have come after Al who have extended their careers by learning how to shoot the three. And Al was one of the first guys to kind of change his narrative and change his perception and reputation, because if you look at those Atlanta years, he was a post-up guy. He's a jump hook guy. And now he is mostly a 3-point shooter and who can rebound and still defend at a decently high level. He's had his ups and downs defensively as he has aged, but still, I think you got to think of Al being retired, and you got to definitely think of, and then does Ray? I saw Ray. Ray was at Game 5. I thought that was very cool. He was the only one of the original or 2008 Big Three. I don't say the original Big Three to come out to Game 5. He was there, shaking hands, congratulating the guys. Tatum. I thought that said a lot. He had a credential on too. I mean, I know he probably bought his ticket but he brought his son. I think that, I think he might be coming back into the good graces of the organization. And I think the organization probably feels there was a little bit of the fault too for not locking him down earlier. I remember talking to him, before your time, Bobby, talking to him during that year. And he was like, hey man, they can sign me anytime they want. And they didn't. And then, it was like, well, Avery Bradley's going to take your spot. And then Jason Terry got signed. And Ray was like, they don't want me here. And then Danny kind of made that offer at the time, 2 years, $12 million. If they had made that offer during the season, Ray comes back for 2 more years. But, I blame all parties. I mean, could Ray have probably related better to Paul and Kevin about leaving and going to a rival? Of course he could have. But, that'll be interesting topics.
Yeah, and we'll see how much longer Al plays, because he can stack up more accomplishments on top of what he's already done. And this team's certainly going to try to run it back and make it back-to-back titles here. They'll be the favorite depending on what happens around the league this summer. And honestly, a lot of their competitors can't do much, which is a big deal. We'll get to their chances of repeating here in just a second, but I want to give a shout out to our sponsor, PrizePicks. Of course, the finals are over, but the hoop action doesn't stop on PrizePicks. Women's basketball is still heating up. You got stars like Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, looking to make names for themselves alongside the greats like Brianna Storr and Asia Wilson. You can win up to 100 times your cash watching them ball out. PrizePicks is available in more than 30 states across the country, including Massachusetts. Player and stat types available across the board for WNBA. You got baseball going on right now as well. And all you got to do is pick 2 players, pick more or less on their projections, and you are off on PrizePicks. It's that easy. It's our official daily fantasy sports partner. So download the PrizePicks app today. Use the code CLNS for your first deposit match up to $100. That's code CLNS on PrizePicks for a deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Again, use that code CLNS for 100% deposit match up to $100. So, Gary, the Celtics will probably be favorites to repeat here. You got the Nuggets floating around, and they'll certainly be back with a vengeance, I'm sure. The Bucks are going to try to reorganize. There's some teams out there. The Timberwolves took a serious step last year. But a lot of those teams are pretty set in stone, barring a big draft pick that really hits or a minor additional on the edges that solidifies their teams. All of these teams that are competing for the championship next year are pretty set. I know the Knicks can probably shake things up a little bit. The Heat, we'll see what happens there. Philly has some money to throw around, so they're probably the team that could change the most this summer. But it's hard to not imagine. We'll see what happens with Kristaps' health. Al's going to be 39 next year. They'll need to manage him carefully again. The depth is mostly back. They got a couple free agents deeper on the bench, but Hauser's back. They extended Pritchard. So this team's set. That was another cool thing about the parade today is you really didn't have this tense free agency looming over their head or this prospect of one of the major pieces possibly leaving. You're going to have the Derek White thing this summer, but he's signed next year regardless of how that goes. So they're in this really cool position where they know they're running it back. Al is in, Wick Grossbeck said that recently, and, there really wasn't much doubt about that one. So how do you feel early? Again, we're going to have a whole summer ahead of us here to see how the league shapes out, but are you super confident this team repeats next year? Are you moderately confident, or, is there a team out there that could really threaten them?
I'm moderately confident, but I also think I'm not worried about other teams. I'm worried about like the Celtics. They had so much good luck this year. Like in terms of health, like they didn't really have major injuries. Kristaps was the only one that was out for, any extended with the calf, and he missed some of the playoffs, obviously most of the playoffs. But they stayed mostly healthy this year, and they had no real drama, right? No real issues. And I just think when you bring, people can point to Denver, like Denver. The difference between the Celtics and Denver is Denver lost part of their core when Jeff Green left and Bruce Brown left. Like two major components walked away, and the Nuggets thought that they could replace them with Christian Brown and Peyton Watson, and it never worked out. Like Watson was kind of barely in the playoff rotation. Brown had his moments, but they thought those two young guys were going to step up. The Celtics don't have those issues. The only thing is, it's just so hard to repeat in any sport, but especially, except the Kansas City Chiefs.
Who was the last in the NBA? The Heat?
The Warriors.
Oh, Warriors, yeah.
Yeah. In 17 with the Durant Warriors.
And they had the most loaded team imaginable.
Yeah, they were loaded. So I'm moderately confident. And I'm not, I think they have the talent to do it. But it's just how are they going to deal with being the hunted? And I think they were sort of the hunted this year because they were so heavily favored in many cases, but they were still chasing, right? And they never got that quote-unquote showdown with Denver that people thought was going to be the finals. But all those teams now, when you go to a new season, are resurrected and back. Milwaukee's back. But as you said, Bobby, every team in the East is kind of like Milwaukee's getting older. Brook Lopez will be 37. Chris Middleton is, had a good playoffs, but can he sustain that throughout the season? Dame is not getting any younger. Giannis is still at the top of his game, but health has been an issue with him the last couple of years. And what will the Bucks do with a full year Doc? They'll be a contender, but will they be like better than the Celtics? You say no. Philadelphia, we don't know. Are they going to go after Paul George? We're now hearing that they're cooling off from that type of interest. What they're going to do with that salary slot? Obviously, Tobias Harris is gone. They can fill that role. What are they going to do? Who can you rely on Embiid for a full season, or is he going to be? Is that going to be the rest of his career where health is always an issue? The Knicks. Well, if the Knicks come back healthy, will Tibbs kind of run them into the ground again? I think the Knicks could be the biggest threat. Indiana, they just signed Siakam. You got to assume they're going to run it back and maybe add a couple of pieces here and there, but they don't have the money or no one's coming to Indiana and signing a max deal. Like they're pretty much who they are. So you're right, Bobby. And I don't know if is there a surprise team in the East that we're not. Will Miami, is that the team that, will Jimmy be motivated? Bam. Is Tyler Hero for another year? They're always injured. There's always issues with health in Miami. I don't think there's a team that you just say, oh, okay, that team, that's going to be the team that really pushes them. Maybe the Knicks. The rest of the teams, like they're, you know, Cleveland. Are you with a new coach? You don't know how that's going to go. With Donovan's situation is
That's a
going to.
weird one. Yeah.
Cleveland could be a team to reckon with if they add a little bit. I know, like they just didn't have the shooting. Max Strus, as much as we consider him a shooter, he shot 34% during the season. He was not good during the season or in the playoffs. Georges Niang lost his role. He was coming off he didn't play much at all in the playoffs, especially in the Celtics series. The two guys they added from last year really didn't work out as greatly as they thought. So I don't know. The West we can talk about. It's a whole different issue because I think those teams are all. Minnesota's mad. They're ramping up. Denver's going to try to get back and take advantage of Jokic's window. Dallas, and we'll see what they do. The Clippers. What happens with Paul George? The Lakers, can they do anything more than just hire a new coach and hope things are different? But I think that we just saw Oklahoma City make a move here, and the Thunder are
They're
probably the team.
interesting too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the Thunder might be the team to beat now, and they're going to make more moves, and they got more draft picks to trade. They need a big man, So, but I still think, Bobby, the Celtics on paper are the best team. I don't think it's any question about that. And I think Brad Stevens is going to tinker with the roster and add maybe, I think we can probably both agree Brissett didn't quite work out as well as we thought he would as that kind of swing man, 3-point shooter, 3-and-D guy. I don't know what they do with him. Tillman
Got
and
a player
Cornette.
option. We'll see.
Yeah. Brissett as a player option?
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, you would think he'd probably be back, but maybe he thinks he can get more money on the table, from another lower market team. Tillman and Cornette, do they need to get a productive big? Because now you've got Porzingis often injured and a 39. Horford in his 39 age 39 season. He's 38, but he's going to be 39 next year, and you can't rely on him too much. Do you think Kada can maybe fill that role? Do you trust him yet, or do you go get a productive, try to get a bargain price big who can, or stretch 4 or 5 who can come in and hit a couple of buckets for you? So the Celtics, but I don't think the Celtics run it back completely, Bobby. I think the core is coming back, but I think they mess with that bench. They got to determine J.D. Davidson. His 2 ways have run out. They got to sign him to a standard NBA deal. Do they see a future with him? Drew Peterson. What happens with him? I don't think that maybe did they fill that other 2-way spot?
They did not, which is interesting because that year when they went to the finals 2 years ago, they brought in, I think it was Matt Ryan, and he just hung around, and then they brought him into the summer league. So they didn't do that this time around, which was interesting.
Yeah. So who knows about? So they had some 2-way because they can't fill it with Davidson. So that's at least so Drew Peterson's the only 2-way guy on the roster. So they got to fill 2 of those spots. And who the draft? Can you get somebody that helps you right away at 30? I think you can probably get a senior player or a junior, a guy who's maybe a college veteran at that stage to maybe come in and play kind of a role for you. I don't think the Celtics need another 19-year-old. I mean, because you got Jordan Walsh, and they got to figure out, does he have a future? Do you, give him another summer league and can he play a role? And remember, he's so young. Literally, I don't think he's 20 yet. So it's a lot of questions, little questions, But I think Brad, knowing Brad, he's going to upgrade. Like, he's not going to let this window go. What do you think?
No, he's going to remain aggressive. He notoriously stays aggressive with those picks to the point where he still hasn't picked a first-round player in his 10 years president. So It's tough to imagine. We're going to be sitting there on Wednesday, Gary. It's going to be 10 o'clock. We're going to be waiting for them to make that pick.
It's
And
trading down.
it's more probable than not, yeah, that they're either going to trade
Because there's
down
going to be tons
or
of teams looking for a first round pick and, getting maybe one of the guys they really like on a guaranteed deal as opposed to taking him in the second round and having to pay him because you'd rather pay a guy the 30th slot, that rookie slot, than 34. And if the guy is really, really good, then you might have to give him that Jordan Walsh deal, or you might have to pay him a little bit more money, a second rounder. So I'm sure there'll be a whole list of interested teams looking to swap picks with the Celtics and force them, and have them draft maybe in the 30s. In addition to I think they have the 56 pick. I think the one or the pick before or after the Lakers when they probably
54.
choose. Yeah, when they probably choose Bronny James.
That would be
Yeah.
something if they select James. I don't think
If the
that doesn't feel
Celtics
like
do
a bad
that,
move.
that would be a hilarious move. I mean, I couldn't believe that would be
That's something Ainge would have done.
Yeah, that would be, and just give him like a guaranteed NBA deal and just see what happens with him. Like, who knows? I don't think they would do that, but obviously that's what he wants, a guaranteed deal. The two-way ain't working for Bronny. So, but yeah, I do think the good thing if you're a Celtic fan is to know that Brad's not going to rest on his laurels. He's not going to go on vacation this summer and leave free agency alone. He's not going to watch all these other teams make moves and not make moves himself.
Yeah, I want to go a little further on some of the stuff they could do this summer. And of course, the draft is coming up on Wednesday. I want to point to one guy because I haven't done, as I'm sure many of us haven't, Gary, much draft research given the spot this team's in. So we're all going to cram on that a little bit ahead of Wednesday. But first, I want to shout out Game Time. Finals are over, fortunately, for all ticket buyers because those were some of the most expensive seats you'll ever see. Try again to the Garden or in Dallas for these finals games. But baseball is a good way to get into a more affordable game this summer. And if anyone's going to have a great deal, up to 60% off if you're buying last minute here, it's Game Time. You can save even more with some in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or event. They got zone deals. You can get your seat view, which is my favorite part of using Game Time. You can see where you're sitting, and they'll show you a little view of what it's going to look like from your seat. So take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the app, create an account, and use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Of course, terms apply over at Game Time. So we'll wrap this up, Gary, just talking a little bit more about what the Celtics can do this summer. So they are at 30. They probably need a big 4 type there. I think you mentioned that they're going to need someone in that spot behind Al, specifically a guy who can maybe develop the shot with size to handle that role, maybe play a little bit of 4 and 5 like Al can. Of course, Al, back in 2007 was one of the, top prospects you can imagine for that kind of role. So it's going to be almost impossible to replicate his skill set in a young guy there, especially with how long it takes bigs to develop. So, I wouldn't go into the draft expecting to find the next Horford or a guy who can replace him theoretically there. But I think that position's important going into the future, especially with Porzingis's injury status always being a question in any given year. So, there's some names around there you can toss around. I think Filipowski from Duke's interesting. I've watched him a little bit in recent years, and he's got a shot. He's 6'11", 7 feet there. So that's probably someone I'd be looking at if you stay at 30. And then, of course, if they're going to do the thing they did last year, you're probably going to be looking at some deeper names, probably some more developmental guys at that spot, which is fine because they have the room to spend some time on a guy and let him develop and learn from Al or whatever it might be at that spot. And they probably don't want to play a young guy in the front court anyway, as you said, given the position they're in. I would bet on Cornette probably being back. They really like him. I don't think he
they do.
command a ton of money, and he just doesn't seem like a guy who's ready to move his family and all that stuff too. You know, I think he really likes it here. I think he's like being part of the Celtics experience. And he's become a locker room staple and all that too. So I think there'll be a lot of momentum to keep him. We'll see with Tillman. Tillman didn't seem to be the most natural fit here. He gave them some good stuff in the finals. He didn't play a ton. Cornette played more than him after that
Yeah, that's
trade.
disappointing. I think considering what he did with Memphis and his playoff experience, that he would come in and just really fill a role, but it was sort of like
He was hurting. I think that was the biggest thing. The knee really held him back. Didn't look like he was moving well for a lot of his stints
you
out
know,
there. I know he got it right by the time the playoffs came around, he said, but that's something that's been a little chronic for him since he started his career. So that's not great. And, you know, they want guys who can shoot, of course, too. I think that's probably the
you know,
biggest reason Joe didn't play him. So that could end up being the odd guy out in the front court there. As we mentioned earlier, O'Shea's probably going to opt in, I'd imagine. And you can keep him in the mix there. We'll see how much he actually plays at that spot. But there's room for another big. Grant, there probably wasn't room to keep Grant a year ago, money-wise and all that. But that's the kind of guy you would love to have right now, is that 4 or 5 kind of guy who can defend a bunch of positions and shoot, which is the big, big one. Because Tillman really can't shoot. Cornette doesn't shoot. Brissett didn't really show much shooting flash this year. So
yeah.
shooting with size. Brad always talks about that, right? You're looking for that this offseason if you're going to find anyone out there. And that's a tough thing to find, especially when you don't have much money.
Well, the good thing I think is, Bobby, that when you win a championship, you become more attractive to free agents
Right.
who are looking to win a championship. So there will be a group of players who will probably take less money to come to Boston. Look at the chemistry of this team. They all, like, you've been around some, Bobby, now, 4 or 5 years, and you've seen how some of these teams get along and don't get along. And I've been around a little bit longer, and I have not, like, this team really likes each other. Like, there isn't a bad guy in that locker room. And when you see them celebrate, you see Brissett, even though he's not playing, be a good locker room presence. You see Peyton, how much they love on that guy. Like, you look at the players, see that, and they see, like, hey, I don't know much about the city or living there, but man, y'all seem to have a lot of fun, and you guys winning, and that's what I want to do. So there will be a much bigger attraction to Boston for guys who might say, hey, I can get $8 million from Atlanta and win 36 games, or I can get $3 million from Boston and win 66 games. I'm gonna take the 66 because I want a championship. And I think when you get veterans like that, so we can look at the list of potential free agents, but I think you'll definitely get guys who might take less to come to Boston. They look at Jason, they look at Jalen, they see how much Al gets love. He's a veteran guy. Just good guys throughout the locker room. How much fun Kristaps had. Kristaps is known as been a problem in some of his other places, but I mean, they loved him here, and there's a great relationship. And guys read that and go, well, wait a minute, like, I want to be part of that,
So one name jumps off the list to me here, because there's not a lot of bigs. There's not a lot of guys that'll be affordable to them, that'll impact them and not expect minutes. But one guy does jump off the list here, and it's pretty obvious, and it's a guy everyone knows. Daniel Tice.
ah,
Could you see a third Daniel Tice stint in Boston?
I don't know. I mean, there you have to figure out if
They
Kata,
love him.
if you think Kata, if you don't like Kata or you don't think he's ready, then you could do that. But if I'm Kata, I'm like, listen, man, like, I can do. I'm not saying Kata's out there shooting threes. He's not. He's a
Right.
rebounder. He's a scrappy guy. But if you bring it back Tice, and I think he had some decent moments in LA this year with the Clippers. I think he kind of lost his minutes toward the end. But I tend to think they might go in another direction.
So you're a believer in Cada?
I don't, not as a 3-point shooter,
Right.
obviously not as a stretch four, but as a dirty work guy, I think you can give him some more minutes. I think you could have given him those rough and tumble minutes you gave Tillman. Maybe not, because I mean maybe not. Like I'll say that, I'll take that back. Maybe, but I also think they didn't Cada foul too much. And he probably in this high level playoff game, he probably would have fouled out or got
Right.
3 fouls in 5 minutes. But I also think you probably could have given him more experimental looks than that he got. Because here's like, okay, here are the guys that are free agents that I'm looking at that are probably could be targets. Our close friend Bobby Goga Batazzi.
Goga
Okay.
Batadze, yeah.
Yeah. I don't
He
know.
was really good for Orlando when all their centers were out.
Yeah, he started for a while, then suddenly got banished to the bench, and I don't think he played much at all in the playoffs.
Really physical guy.
Yeah, I mean, him and Jalen have history. Our friend Andre Drummond.
And there was a little something there during the year. There were a
Yeah,
lot of rumblings that the Celtics were looking at him, and he ended up going. Where'd he end up? Did he stay in Chicago? Right.
yeah, he's still in Chicago, and I think he had a chance to come to Boston or whatever, and didn't. I mean, they've kind of flirted with him in the past.
The
And
rough
I'm
thing
just,
with him's the free throws. It's really
yeah,
brutal,
you
but
know,
great
let me
rebounder.
ask you this. Let me ask you this. Let me ask you this, Bobby. Would you consider a union with Gordon Hayward?
In the right circumstances, but I don't think those circumstances will come together. Obviously, I know his wife was on social media complaining about the role or whatever it might have
Yeah,
been
in
in
Oklahoma, like they
Oklahoma
didn't play
City,
him,
and
and why did we come here if
yeah,
he wasn't going to
that one's
play? Yeah,
tough. And he was, he had the injuries here and all of that. He had moments of greatness during the bubble in particular, before he got hurt there. But I don't think there's minutes for him here. So he's probably looking to go somewhere else, I'd imagine, where there are minutes for him. Because Hauser was great this year. The fact that he gave you something
yeah,
in the finals was
yeah.
a huge win. So I can't see that happening.
I mean, it's a consider like it's not something like obviously Gord's at the stage now where he's probably not even going to get the mid level. He's probably going to have to take the veteran minimum. He's 34, history of injuries, uh, not a good stint with Oklahoma City. Basically, Sam Presti said it was a mistake to sign him, and Sam is never that open. I mean, he's not Daryl Morey. He is
Yeah.
Mr. Composed, and for him to say it was kind of a mistake to bring him in was not good for Gordon's reputation
I could
because a
see him
lot of
in Indiana, and there was a
yeah,
connection there in the past, so that would make a lot of
yeah,
sense to me.
that's where he's from. But I was just thinking, like, would you like you're gonna probably have to get creative. Like anyone you bring in, as you know, Bobby, on the minimum salary is going to have their share of, issues, detractors. You're
Right.
not going to bring in the perfect guy. You're not going to
Yeah.
bring in the guy, like in as much as it might not work. Like look at the situation with O'Shea. It looked like that might work. It didn't. And he'll probably he's a great locker room guy, right? And he played some defense and some key stretches during the playoffs. Can he work on his shot all summer and say, will Brad and those guys say, okay, O'Shea, if you're coming back, man, you gotta take 1,000 shots a day. Like we gotta have you be able to shoot the ball better. You can't be 23, 27% from three. Like you got to get that up to 34, 35. You got to be a threat.
Yeah. The only other name I see on here is Jalen Smith. I thought
I think he
I
has a
saw.
player option. I think he's going to opt out, but would he opt out to take less money to
Yeah, it
come to
wouldn't make a lot of
Boston?
sense,
And he's a
especially for a
younger
guy his
guy.
age.
He's not. Jalen hasn't made much money yet, So I think he's going to go probably somewhere, another team that has money to spend that he can maybe get a backup center role. Because I thought he can shoot the three. I thought he was actually okay at times, and then Carlisle, man, him and younger players sometimes, if Carlisle goes against you, it's kind of hard to get back into his good graces. So I could see him being a guy who's probably going to another team, a younger team, you know. But it's an interesting market. I'm looking at the free agent centers. You know, our friend Mo Bamba. Let me see, Thomas Bryant.
Yeah. You
Drew
got some
Eubanks.
really you get some really old guys like PJ Tucker and Jeff Green
Yeah,
who
Drew Eubanks
might be
just
at the
opted
end.
out of his deal in Phoenix. Our DeAndre Jordan, Luke obviously is still there. There's not all these guys you look at. I mean, James Wiseman, he's restricted though. I mean, Mo Wagner, our friend, unrestricted.
Yeah.
It just isn't, like you said. I like Jericho Sims, but he's restricted. You're not going to pay a lot of money to get him in. Dario
Yeah.
Saric, like, do you take a flyer on a guy like Dario Saric who can shoot the three when he's healthy, but he's not healthy very often? You know, it's slim pickings, man.
It really is. And it makes you feel better about bringing Luke back,
Yeah,
potentially bringing
exactly.
Tillman
Now it
back
makes
too.
Luke
Yeah.
Luke look like Jokic or something. These guys, because you're looking
Yeah,
at this.
I feel pretty good about Luke being back. If you could keep Luke and Tillman, that gives you the full array of versatility there, which is good. And that's, of course, what you had this year. It'll be interesting to see what Tillman wants. I know he's got a bunch of kids and, a young family too. And maybe he's looking for
Yeah,
somewhere to solidify himself a little bit more after leaving Memphis. And he really liked it here by all accounts. So we'll see what his priority is. He wasn't making a ton of money before. So if there's an
no,
opportunity for him to make some real backup center money, and he's that kind of guy. Yeah, I think he's pretty comparable to a lot of backup centers around the league. Not offensively, but defensively, he's one of the higher rated guys in the league. So I could see that being a guy who gets away from Boston, just given the financial limitations they have here. So it'd be ideal to keep him and Luke, but you might end up
yeah,
having to choose one of those guys. So we'll see what they do. There's plenty of time before that gets going. Really not as much as you would think, though. Free agency starts a week from Sunday. So the
yeah.
Celtics going
It's
to have to
right
start
around
to
the corner.
think about all this stuff soon. Again, Cornette a free agent, Tillman a free agent, O'Shea player option. I'm sure we'll hear about that pretty soon. So those are the big ones for the Celtics, and then some stuff lower on the roster as well. But all the key guys in place, and they all celebrated today at the parade. Gary and I took it all in today. A lot of highlights up on the Celtics All Access channel, so go subscribe over there to check out all the views that we got from the back of the pickup truck today as we made our way down the parade line. Memories for life, Gary. You're never gonna
Yeah, it
forget
was
it.
fun. That was honestly fun. Something I'll never forget. I was like, when they said a pickup truck, I was like, okay, are they gonna put us in like a van and we like look outside the windows at people? Like, I
Yeah.
did not know it would literally we'd be back on a long van kind of sports truck there, and they create little metal seats and with little cushions and with seat belts on them too. Like those
Look at
things
me.
look.
I got a little color today, Gary.
Oh, there you go, Bob. There you go. There you go. Get a little tan there. But yeah, I had literally no clue like how they were going to do this. I was like, okay, they're not going to put us. We don't. They said that we don't have duck boat, but we have like
Yeah.
a truck, and I'm like, okay, so yeah, it's crazy, but that worked out well. And speaking of the Celtics, um, we all kind of compared them to the Panthers, who had the 3-0 lead that got blown out. The Panthers are now down 3-0 in game 6. So that's going to game 7. So, you got to be grateful for the Celtics for closing this one out and just knocking out their opponent, because you could you look to South Florida and they could be blowing a 0-3 lead in game 7 because they're down 3 goals in game 6. And so when you got another reason to understand how good the Celtics were for closing that series out, because You let these series get too far, and suddenly you're in trouble.
Yeah, yeah, I didn't even notice that, and that happens a lot more in hockey than it does in
It does happen a lot
basketball.
more in hockey, but I think it was kind of like a similar, like that. The Celtics got blown out of Game 4. Panthers got blown out of Game 4. Oh, they'll go back home and take care of business, and maybe not for the Panthers, but the Celtics. Much credit for not playing with their food this year, taking all their series and 4-5 in the playoffs. Much respect. That was a great run.
Yeah, for sure. Were you surprised Dallas didn't put up a little bit more of a fight? There wasn't a lot of drama to those finals, which, looking
No,
back on it.
I think that honestly, Bobby, I think they found out in game one how good the Celtics were. Like I think that not the world. I think, you saw the pricks and it was like, was it 9 of the 17 ESPN people picked the Dallas and Nick Wright picked Dallas in 5. I think there was this perception that Luka was by far the best player in the world, that Kyrie was like, people were saying, well, the Mavericks have the 2 best players in the series. It was like, really? Like,
Yeah.
okay, like Kyrie's like, yeah, I'll take Kyrie over Tatum. Like, people were saying that before the finals started.
Kyrie really struggled too in those
Yeah.
finals.
And I just thought that game one, Bobby, when like the moment Jalen guarded Luka half court or full court, and like they just put that clamp and holding the 89 points, I think the Mavericks were like, okay, the stuff we did against Minnesota, we can't do. The lobs, the corner threes. Like I think they thought they'd have an easier time. And then when they did not pull out that game 2, and that was the Celtics' worst shooting game, and they were terrible from the 3 in that game, and the Mavericks still lost. I think they kind of realized, and then losing game 3. I just think they knew from probably the middle of game 2 that they did not have the better team.
Yeah, and Jalen had that big shot in game 3 to take it back there, and that probably was the biggest reason he came away with that MVP. It was his efforts down the stretch of that game. But definitely a memorable team. Definitely a team statistically that was in the all-time category. And if they want to solidify that, they'll have to do it again next year, and that
Do
will
it
certainly
again,
be
run
the
it back.
expectation. So we will take a little break, not too long of one. Draft on Wednesday. We'll have plenty of coverage of that. Here on CLNS Media, Celtics All Access, and then free agency getting going. So we'll take at least a few days here. Appreciate you taking some time here tonight, Gary. You can get him on podcast form on the Big 3 podcast here on CLNS Media with Sherrod and Kwani. And of course, check out his work in the Boston Globe. He's going to have a piece coming on the parade today, so you can read Gary's experience out there. And again, check out all our videos of that here on Celtics All Access. Thanks again, Gary.
Thanks, Bobby. It was fun, always.